The Power Hour is on the air, coming to you live on YouTube and Facebook. It's great to have you in this evening with us. You've got a power-packed show for you today. I have to apologize for yesterday. We'd had a few technical difficulties, a few things that just kind of went down, and we just had to play a little catch-up on some technical things. But I'm glad to be back. It's great to be here tonight, and we've got a jam-packed show for you. But since yesterday's show was postponed, we'll be moving that to Saturday. So yesterday's show will be going to Saturday at 7. So that'll be our makeup day for that. But we've got a show right now for you. Welcome to the Power Hour. I'm your host, Michael Bishop. And let's get started. We're doing a new format. What I'd like to do now is I'd like to set up a 5-segment show for you. That's right, I'm going to do 5 segments. So what I'm going to do different is I'm going to start off and break down the segments for you a little easier. So for our first segment today, we're going to break down Matthew Stafford, almost a 49er. And we're going to get into it now. Welcome to the Power Hour. So it's interesting to think about certain scenarios in sports. You definitely feel that we all go through certain motions and ideas of who would do what on certain teams if certain players become available. And when it was announced that Matthew Stafford was traded to the Rams in exchange for Jared Goff and picks, you thought to yourself, it was one of those scenarios you talk to your buddies at the bar like, well, I bet if we had such and such, we'd probably do this or we'd probably do that. And it's a possibility. But you never see those scenarios play out. But in this case, it definitely very much happened. And it's really funny when it did because it kind of caught everybody off guard. As much problems as the Rams and Sean McVay were having with Jared Goff, you didn't think that it was going to be this bad to the point where they had to make a move. You felt there was turmoil there, but also you felt at the same time, well, maybe it's just one of those things where it's just a tiff between a coach and a player. Maybe it'll get worked out. And it was far from that, unfortunately. But after all was said and done, the Rams ended up with a better player. Detroit ends up in a rebuild, but Jared Goff definitely has an opportunity to try and reevaluate himself and even reinvent himself, which those are good things on both ends. But yesterday was reported from, if I read my report correctly, I'm sorry, The Ringers, the Flying Coach podcast, that San Francisco was very much in detail to possibly bring in Matthew Stafford. Now, you would think that those details would probably put us into the ballpark of, yes, San Francisco would have to give up potential first-round picks, and maybe even Jimmy Garoppolo would probably be a part of the deal. Maybe Josh Rosen would have been part of the deal. It's hard to know who would have been in play for that certain deal. But you would definitely think Garoppolo was definitely going to be moved. But from a technical standpoint, you kind of evaluate what the 49ers are. And would Matthew Stafford have been a better fit there than he is right now with the Rams? And I would definitely have to give you a resounding no. I look at the 49ers, and what I see is a team that has a lot of good young players. They have a very good young coach. They've definitely proven that they can get to the top of the mountain. They just couldn't finish the job. And you would definitely feel that Kyle Shanahan really was pushing for a guy that would fit more into his system. And as much as a quarterback guru as Shanahan is, you would have to feel that, well, as much as Stafford might work in that system, is Stafford just imperfectly perfect? It's hard to really even fathom Stafford playing in the system for Shanahan. And I've bounced it around a lot yesterday when I had time to think about it after the story broke. And from my perspective, I really felt it could work, but it just doesn't feel like it would. You felt like there would just be too much at odds between the coaching staff and between the player, even. I really felt if you had to compare the two, Stafford definitely fit better on the Rams. I feel there's a lot better talent on the receiving core. I feel that they can actually run the ball well. Honestly, a lot better than San Francisco can. And especially in a tough NFC West, that's really got to mean something. You basically have to put it in the position where you're going to be playing some pretty competitive teams throughout the season. And despite the offense of San Francisco at the point, you know their defense is going to be playing pretty damn good. And the same can be said with the Seattle Seahawks, and even the Arizona Cardinals are on the rise with all the acquisitions that they've made and the strength that they've been pushing along, just getting better. They're really in it to try and make a team that's competitive and also out there to just beat up on people. And I like that. And if you're San Francisco, I think in the long term, was Matthew Stafford going to be the best option for you? And I definitely once again say no. I feel that they felt something, especially when the deal just kind of just drifted off and did its own thing. When the Rams finally finalized everything, it was very clear that the 49ers were going to have to find another quarterback, and they're going to have to try and find somebody that fit Shanahan's system. And Trey Lance, to me, as much as it was debated, especially throughout the whole quarterback controversy after Trevor Lawrence and Zach Wilson, who was going to be the number 3 guy. And it was all about either Trey Lance or it was all about, I keep forgetting the kid from Ohio State's name. That's my bad. That's my bad, Chicago fans. I'm sorry. But it was between those two. And at the time, you just kind of felt the Ohio State quarterback had a lot more upside. Trey Lance, as good as he was and as competitive as he was, you really felt, was he ready to take that next step and elevate his game? And in some ways, I feel, there are players from smaller schools that do have success. There's a reason why he was successful in a smaller program. But also, that just goes to show that I feel that he's the kind of player that can elevate a team, especially if he's with the right team. And Trey Lance felt like the right fit for the 49ers. And when you hear the fact that Matthew Stafford was almost traded to the 49ers, in terms of just scheme and just coach, I just didn't see that working. I feel that Shanahan knew he had to have somebody a little more younger and a little more just raw. Because that just seems like the best kind of guy he wants to get his hands on. Somebody that he can teach and somebody that he can give direction to. Trey Lance has talent and Trey Lance can make plays. But Shanahan's the kind of guy that can take a guy like him and polish him. Matthew Stafford's more developed. He knows what he wants to do. He knows how to play the game. He knows his style. And Sean McVay was definitely the better option there. Sean McVay can even find a way to tailor the offense to Matthew Stafford, because that's how giftedly offensively minded that Sean McVay is. And it would work better that way. Especially since I think Stafford can come in and he knows what he's going to be able to do. So on both sides, each side won. So I felt it was better that, even if Matthew Stafford didn't get the opportunity to have a chance to go to the 49ers, which there was a lot of nice pieces there, I just didn't feel it would be a good fit. So the Rams definitely, I think, are going to be the better fit. They're going to benefit more from him. And Sean McVay's going to be able to get more from him. So on each side, everybody wins. Everybody's happy. I don't think it's too big of a deal. But still an interesting story nonetheless. It's definitely one of those barroom scenarios, like I said, that comes true. You kind of wish that you had the opportunity to have this guy on your team, and now you do. And I think for the Rams' sake, I think they've got enough pieces in place to continue to try and see if they can make this window stay a little open just a little more longer. But we'll just see how that goes. And for the 49ers' sake, I think youth is the way to go there. You had to find guys that were a little more young, and you had to find guys that were a little more placed to get more direction from. You feel a little more confident. You feel a little more just at ease, especially knowing you've got a guy young, raw, and he's the kind of guy you like to mold. That's the kind of guy Shanahan likes. And I think Lance will do fine right there, and I think we'll just wait and see how it goes. But all in all, everybody won. The 49ers got their guy of the future, and the Rams got their guy for right now. And we'll just see how that goes as the season progresses. And we'll call that for a break. We're going to take a quick 30 seconds. And when we come back, guys, my 2022 NFL Hall of Fame finalist, possibly. I'll give you my predictions for 5 guys I feel who are ready to get the gold jacket and be enshrined in Canton. This is the Power Hour with your host, Michael Bishop. We'll be back in 30. It's the Power Hour. I'm your host, Michael Bishop, and we are on the air, live streaming on YouTube and Facebook. Great to have you in this evening. Beautiful evening it is, and we are getting ready to dive into segment 2. And that segment is the 2022 NFL Hall of Fame potential finalists. Every year, it seems like the NFL Hall of Fame finds a way to make everybody mad. More so than less. The voting process does have its flaws, and it always seems like there's always guys that should have been in sooner get left out. And what becomes years becomes decades. And the decades seem to just slowly move along. And some guys that were once on the list see themselves on a senior list, basically waiting to get in at a later time. And it's gone on for quite a long time. And I did my homework for a little bit of this portion because there's so many great players to go over. And you try to give everybody a fair shake, but I had to look at the guys that I felt really had to make it in this year. And believe me, there's a lot of guys that are waiting right now that I felt could have gotten in with an opportunity. But the problem is, it's just you can't really just try and overshoot a lot of guys. You have to be a little more sensible in your approach. There's always a way to try and find who should be in now and who should wait and see if their accomplishments get a little more golden each year, I guess is the best way to put it. And in this case, this was a list that I put together of who I felt were the 5 best players who should be in Canton this year. And it was off basically performance. It was off just reputation. And most importantly, I had a fella that had been on the waiting list for what seems forever. And I felt this was his year because there's always a guy who's waiting to get in. And there's always just that opportunity that knocks, and then they finally get the invitation to Canton. And I'll tell you who that player is as we go down the list. I'll save him for last. But we'll go ahead and start it. I've got your 2022 potential Hall of Fame class right here. And I went with 5 players. It was going to be a little easier to do the players. I know there's coaches still waiting and executives and so on and so forth down the list, but I've tended to focus on the players. So we'll go with the players just to make it easy for everyone. So the first to be inducted right now, your first is DeMarcus Ware. And that was an easy choice. It's his first year of eligibility. He's had a very prolific career in Dallas and in Denver. Some would even say his best years were in Denver. And his stats came out as this. He had literally You've had 657 tackles. You had 8 fumble recoveries, 138 sacks, 3 interceptions, 1 return for a touchdown. Very respectable stats. The man was feared all over the NFL. You could line him up just about anywhere, and he could cause havoc anywhere on the field. He was definitely a disruptor, and he was always playing physical. There's very few people on the defensive end that scared people, and DeMarcus Ware was one of those guys. One of the few players that Bill Parcells handpicked when he was drafted in Dallas, Ware truly shone and shined every chance that he got while he was lined up. Some of his best games were in primetime with the Cowboys at sometimes. I can always remember he always gave the Giants fits. He was always disruptive with the Eagles. And with Washington, it just seemed like he was all over the field. And it just seemed like when he was traded to Denver, or when he decided to sign with Denver, I'll say, everybody just had a breath of fresh air, and they were relieved that he was gone. But not so much on the AFC West. There, he continued his career and was always still in the field, making plays, being disruptive, being that guy that just got to the quarterback, made fumbles. He was just one tenacious dude. And that was really an easy pick. Really didn't have to think too hard on that. And if you ever get a chance to look at his film, check it out. It's worth a watch. There's a reason why he's going to be on any list when the Hall of Fame discussion has become, and that's why he's on mine. Second, it's really easy. He's been on the waiting list for a while. Tony Boselli of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, at the time when the Jacksonville Jaguars were good, yes, I said that, when the Jacksonville Jaguars were good, Tony Boselli was a force on the offensive line. He literally pancaked guys. Tony Boselli is one of the reasons why the term pancake came to be. He was a human wall. That's really what he was. The man could not be broken through. He couldn't make anybody just be more frustrated at the point of being on the defensive line. Tony Boselli played most of his career in Jacksonville. And believe me, there were just a lot of years why Fred Taylor had a lot of open holes. And a lot of reasons why Mark Brunell was able to get a touchdown pass or to run for his life if he had to. Tony Boselli was the heart of that offensive line. And that was all there was to it. Tony Boselli has been waiting for quite a while now. And at this point, it's time for him to get in. And with the list of offensive linemen that have already gotten in, Steve Hutchinson, Kevin Mawai, Alan Faneca, it's already in. It just seems like the door's starting to open more for linemen. And I really like that. I think it's important that these guys get more recognition than they get. And it's just difficult to see that you'll see a lot of linemen get passed over. And years become decades, and they end up sitting and waiting for that call. And it never comes. Or it comes and they're already in their 60s or 70s. Or they've passed even. And I really feel it's important that the guys that have played on the offensive line get more opportunities to get that call to the Hall of Fame. Because there's so many great ones that shouldn't be waiting. And Tony Boselli is definitely one that shouldn't have to wait. He's too good. He's too talented. And there's just a whole reel of highlights of just how dominant he was. Jacksonville was not going to be the team it was if it wasn't for Tony Boselli. And he very much deserves that gold jacket. Third, another one that's been waiting for a while, Leroy Butler from Green Bay. Leroy Butler was just so underrated. But he was so beloved in Green Bay. And the man could make plays. Breaking down the highlights for you, he had 38 interceptions with 1 touchdown, 13 forced fumbles, 10 fumble recoveries, 2 touchdowns, and 889 tackles. That's impressive, especially at his position. Leroy Butler, for the better part of the early 90s, was very much always in the discussion of being a Hall of Famer. He was one of those guys that when he played, people said, this guy's got skill and he's going to be the kind of guy that you talk about in Canton. And here we are, and he's still not having that opportunity. And it just blows my mind. Just another guy, so much talent, was just a force on the football field and respected by his competitors as well. Just hasn't had that opportunity to get that call, but I think this is his year. And Green Bay really needs a win of some kind. They need something good. And I think this is very well deserving of just getting the love and praise from Green Bay fans. It really just kind of moves the needle. My fourth player is Torrey Holt. And some will debate me on this, but Torrey Holt was a reason why the greatest show on turf existed. Torrey Holt and Isaac Bruce were basically in everybody's face. They did not let up. When they lined up, secondaries basically panicked. Because this was just a dynamic duo of receivers. You couldn't find a better set at that time, other than Randy Moss and Chris Carter. You look at the trail work of what Torrey Holt did, and he's a huge reason of why the St. Louis Rams were as competitive as they were and as why they were dominant on the field. And he was a big reason to also show that Kurt Warner was a good quarterback. Torrey Holt just had an amazing set of hands on him. He was a great athlete, and he really just made guys look silly when they missed him trying to catch the ball. And I really don't have to go through many of his stats because basically Torrey Holt was a human highlight machine. You throw the ball in his direction, he'll find a way to get the end zone. And there's always a receiver that gets left off the list or has to wait for a long time. Torrey Holt should not have to wait a long time. This should be his year. Give him the gold jacket. End of the story. And now finally, the final person that will get into Canton this year, and it's well-deserved, and it's his final year on the ballot before he gets to the senior ballot, which means every player has a certain amount and a lot of time that they can get voted in. And if they don't get voted in on the final time, then they get moved to the senior ballot. And the senior ballot basically is just the older players that generally just end up waiting a long time. But I feel that this player has earned his stripes. He's waited long enough. And the final player going into the 2020 Hall of Fame would be Sam Mills of New Orleans. Sam Mills was pretty much the basic story of like a guy getting a break and then just running away with it. He's one of those guys that came in the league and was like, wow. You know, breaking down his stats, you had a guy with 22 forced fumbles, 23 fumble recoveries, 20.5 sacks, and 11 interceptions and 1 touchdown from his stats. Respectable numbers. And he did this in about an 11-year span, which is even more impressive. The man gets an opportunity to play on the team. He moves the needle of his career. He continues to get better as he goes. And he's really all over the field. He's one of those guys, when you were watching highlights of the Saints, Sam Mills was in those highlights. He's the guy that was a disruptor. He was a guy that really just could go out and make plays. And just did it on some really historically bad Saints teams. And that shouldn't have to keep a single player from not being in the Hall of Fame because their team never progressed. There's plenty of guys in the Hall of Fame that have been on bad teams or horrid teams and are in the Hall of Fame. And Sam Mills is one of those guys who got his opportunity and made it amazing. And the fact he hasn't received a jacket yet is just mind-blowing. So to me, I think it's time to stop playing around. This man's earned his bust. He's earned the right to stand on that stage with his peers and to be welcomed into Canton. I feel at this point right now, he's the type of guy that has earned the right to go in. And it's hard seeing other guys get passed over, because you never know if you'll get to see the player that you grew up watching or appreciating actually get to make that move into Canton. And the hard part is, some guys will never get to see it. And it's throughout a lot of reasons. And unfortunately, it's another show for another day. But I can just say this. I truly feel that these are the 5 that exemplify of what the league stands for. And they are the ones that have given so much to the game. And I think it's time for the game to give back to them. I feel that they've earned a right to have their bust put into the Canton. That they have done everything that they could give for the game. And now it's time that they get what they've rightfully deserved. Well, alright, guys. Whew. Got a little heated. Alrighty. Well, we'll take a quick 30-second break. And I'm going to come back to you, and I'm going to give you my 5 best improved teams of the season. Who are they? Well, you'll have to wait and be back in 30 seconds. This is the Power Hour. I'm your host, Michael Bishop. The Power Hour is on the air, streaming live to you on YouTube and Facebook. I'm your host, Michael Bishop. Welcome to segment 3 of the Power Hour. We definitely got a little longer on that second segment than I wanted to, but there's a lot to get off my chest. But for segment 3, I wanted to break down to you the 5 best improved teams throughout the offseason. These are the teams that I feel have basically helped reshape their roster and helped build themselves up a lot stronger than they were a year ago, even improving themselves on some of these teams. It feels like even after the free agency's over and after the draft's done, and even after a few late signings, you have to take into consideration of what these teams are going to do in the long run. And these are the 5 teams that I've chosen that basically are going to not only improve themselves on the field, but I also feel are really just the ones that went and evaluated what they needed the best and came back and really just locked everything down. Even some of them building for the long term. So let's throw the list down. So for the first one would be the Cleveland Browns. I really like the draft that they had. I felt they had just an enormous potential at adding some great playmakers on the defense side of the ball. And you really looked at what they did from that perspective, that they're trying to be a more defensive team through the draft. And also going out into free agency and adding Jadeveon Clowney, which we will see how that goes. I'm still on the fence about that move. But you like the pieces that they added throughout free agency on some of the aspects of it. And then, like I said, the draft was a lot stronger for them. I felt that they could go in and add a few guys that could help be playmakers and especially build for the future. And if you're Cleveland, that's something that you haven't had a lot of, is to build for the future. It seems more or less the last few decades you've been building to basically fix what hadn't worked. And it's nice to know that you're on the right track. Will Baker Mayfield keep elevating his play? Will Landry and Beckham be able to make plays and coexist if they're on the field together? We'll be able to see that. But I do feel that they were one of the best teams that moved along and added on to what they already had. So you feel positive about their chances. But in the long run of things, Cleveland's done a pretty good job the last couple of years adding pieces. The second team would be the New England Patriots. We all knew they were going to have to make some huge moves. And they went out and spent. And I mean, they spent that money like they didn't want it. They were burning cash and they were grabbing every player they could. And really the first notable signing was Jonnu Smith. And covering the Titans a lot, they added a really good tight end. He's a great blocker, and he can make a lot of great catches. So the man got paid, and he deserved to get paid. And in a system where New England likes using tight ends, and where Cam Newton's especially more comfortable making passes to tight ends, you definitely felt that was a great fit there. Now, with the addition of Henry from Los Angeles, that really didn't make a lot of sense. I really had to give it some thought, but after really just kind of mulling it over, it kind of just made me feel like back when the Patriots were using a two tight end set, especially when they had Gronkowski and Hernandez back when both were playing at the same time. Well, they did make some good plays together, and really you felt like it was a good system that could probably flourish again under Josh McDaniels. So a two tight end set would work, but I feel Jonnu Smith's going to get a bulk of the work. Then next up, you basically had a nice addition of Matt Judon, and also re-adding Van Noy from Miami. So you solidify the defensive front on a defense that already has a little bit of talent, but it definitely needed some help on the edge set. And you really felt they upgraded in that position. And they also added a couple other pieces along the offensive line. And really, I felt they're underrating signings, but Belichick's always been good at finding offensive linemen in a lot of places people really wouldn't look. So I feel that they're going to do fine this year. I feel they're going to definitely make some people nervous going into some games, especially with just as much money as they put down and really just made adjustments on things. So New England's definitely going to put some pressure on people, and possibly even a little pressure on the AFC East. Surprisingly, my next team would be the New York Jets. And I really love what they did in the draft. Zach Wilson was going to go number 2 regardless. I feel he's the younger piece that's going to help the team elevate, but they're going to have to go through some growing pains. But it's nice to know that they went out and signed Corey Davis, once again from the Tennessee Titans. The Tennessee Titans. He's really going to help make it a little more comfortable for Wilson to play. He's the kind of guy, he can make plays, and if he stays healthy, he's a great playmaker. It's not necessarily sometimes he's perfect at times. He does have his mistakes. But Davis is capable of making some big game catches, which he has in the past. So the Jets got a nice piece right there. But on the other side is where you really get excited, and that's Elijah Moore. And you look at Elijah Moore's work with Ole Miss, and you already see a guy that's going to come in and really make a lot of people just furious at trying to guard him. The guy can catch just about anything you throw at him. And that's the kind of play set that the Jets need. And it really looks like they're going into a more pass-setting offense. And I think going forward, that'll be for the best. As long as they keep building on the defense and they keep drafting players that can make impact just as soon as they can hit the field, I think they'll be fine. For the most part, the Jets are really kind of just rebuilding, and we know they're going to be rebuilding until they can actually be a little more competitive down the road, which may be in 2 or 3 years, maybe sooner if things go well. But the fact is, I like how they've set themselves up for success on the offensive side. We'll see if the offense can help and get a little more points on the board, which was something the Jets mightily struggled against. And the 4th team I had to choose was the Washington football team. I really liked the additions they made in free agency. I felt Curtis Samuel was a beautiful addition. I really did. I think it was a very underrated signing. I think he'll work very well in that system. I liked William Jackson coming from Cincinnati. I've always felt that he's the kind of guy that if he was on a team with more defensive beef up front, he'd have an easier time. And he's getting that with this defense in Washington. And, of course, you look at Adam Humphries being added to the team. Once again, another member from the Tennessee Titans. If he can stay healthy, I feel he's going to try his best to try and revert himself back to the playing time that he had in Tampa Bay. Because that's really the kind of athlete that Tennessee was trying to get out of him, but he could just never stay healthy. And I also have to look at Ryan Fitzpatrick. The man's a journeyman, but in certain places and in certain times, he's been able to shine. And really, in an NFC East, where really it's between the Cowboys and Washington, and the Giants might be competitive if everyone can stay healthy, and Philly's pretty much rebuilding right now, you kind of feel like maybe Washington, if the quarterback play can be consistent, and if the defense can do their job, it's very possible this team could win the NFC East. It's not out of the realm of possibility. It's really Dallas's to lose, but Washington's got a defense good enough to challenge Dallas. And if they think that it's going to be an easy go, I'm sorry, it's not if you're a Dallas fan. Washington's defense is scary, especially with their front four. You really have to just look at what they've got there and just realize it's not going to be easy at all to try and win that division. Washington, if the quarterback play from Fitzpatrick is good enough, Washington's going to challenge Dallas. I just really see that. And then, of course, finally, the 5th and final team is the Tennessee Titans. I mean, what can I say? The addition of Julio Jones just changed everything. It changes everything. When you add a guy that's that dynamic on the offense and is able to just make people miss and make guys just frustrated at just letting him get loose and catch balls. And especially having A.J. Brown on the other side and Derrick Henry in the backfield and a top 5 quarterback in Ryan Tannehill, that team is going to be an offensive nightmare. And I can't say any more about that. I mean, you look at it on paper and teams are just going to freak. But of course, you look at the addition of Bud Dupree on the defense, which a lot of people called overrated. But at the same time, I feel Bud Dupree is going to get a chance to go out there and try and prove people wrong. I think he's a good enough athlete on his own merit, and he really does have a decent defensive line in front of him, especially with the help of Jeffrey Simmons and Harold Landry on the other side. It's not like Bud Dupree's having to do everything on his own. Bud Dupree is just having to go in and help move the defensive line and make life easier for the secondary. So you have to add Tennessee to the top 5. I don't care who you are. You know, you can say it was an overrated signing, adding Julio Jones. You can say it was an overrated signing with Bud Dupree. But the truth is, the Titans have continuously been on the radar since John Robinson took the GM job. They continue to sign guys, and even if they don't work, or even if players don't work in the draft, they continue to take chances. And that's how you get to be a team in the top 5. That's how you get guys to pay attention to you. Even if they want you to go away. Even if they just want you to magically fall off the cliff. I'm sorry, the Tennessee Titans, as long as they stay healthy, are here to stay. And they improved quite a bit on the offensive side of the ball. So we'll call that segment 3. Definitely a good little break out there. Feeling good. The show's going to continue moving. We'll take a quick 30-second break. And when we come back, I've got 3 teams that I've chosen that are really going to have to go through a major overhaul. Who are those 3? We'll find out in 30 seconds. This is the Power Hour with your host, Michael Bishop. It's the Power Hour, coming to you live on YouTube and Facebook. We are on the air. It's great to have you all in this evening. It's been a really fun-packed show. Definitely had a lot of great topics today, and we're going to keep it going. We'll get ready and dive into segment 4, which segment 4 right now, we'll start out with this. For every team in the NFL, for all the young risers and all the consistent contenders, you've got teams that are going to go through some pretty bad times as it goes throughout the regular season. And a lot of it's through a lot of different reasons. Age, inconsistency, loss of free agents, circumstances that are awaiting just final say-so, and just bad decisions, all in all. And it's unfortunate because really these teams were on a top tier at one point. And you really feel like every year, even the teams that are going through that transition, eventually they're going to get better, especially with the right people in charge. And for 2 of them, I feel, yes, that's very much true. And one of them, I'm not so sure, just because there's so much going on. And it's really hard to just make this kind of call. I can't say how they'll be in the future, but right now, let's break down the 3 teams that are going to go through a major overhaul in the next year or 2. And the first one would be the New Orleans Saints. We all knew eventually Drew Brees was going to retire. We just didn't know how long we were going to have him around. And riding off into the sunset in such a disappointing fashion against a playoff loss against the Buccaneers. You just felt just sick, just kind of seeing that just be the end of it. I mean, for me, honestly, it was like watching Dan Marino retire after getting shellacked by the Jaguars 62-7 back in 1999. That's really what I can only describe it as. Granted, there were two different games and two different scenarios, but that's just how you felt. It was hard watching Drew Brees leave on that note. You wanted to see him have a chance at winning another Super Bowl. Through his flaws, Drew Brees was still very much a likable guy. And you just hated to see how it ended. Once again, the scenario, good movie, bad ending. But in that whole process, even after Brees retired, it just seemed like the Saints have been overspending on guys. Their salary cap's been a mess for the last couple of years. They tend to break the bank for some guys, but then eventually they kind of have to go back and let a few guys go, especially some of their seasoned vets. And losing that kind of experience helps. It helps and it hinders. Whereas you're adding new guys to plug and play, without Drew Brees in this system, it's really just very iffy. They still got a good offensive line. And they still got Alvin Kamara, who I still think is a top 5 running back. But the question at quarterback is the biggest one. And it's really going to come down to Hill or Winston. Who's going to be the guy? And I just haven't seen enough consistency from either yet. It's going to go down to basically quarterback play. And that's just what seems to be the case for just the success of this season. And if it doesn't work, then you kind of put yourself in a really bad position for the future. You hate wasting the talent that you have, especially the guys that are being difference makers and your playmakers. And when it comes down to quarterback play, there's going to be so much inconsistency this season, and you're asking your defense to win games or to keep you in this thing. And is either Hill or Winston going to be good enough to make those plays to win those games? Only time will tell, but at the same time, I just don't feel confident enough of either two to get that opportunity to play. And eventually, we'll just see what happens down the road, but honestly, I just don't see a lot of positives coming through for the New Orleans Saints this year. The second team would be the Pittsburgh Steelers. And it's all because of age. You have a lot of just seasoned vets on that team. Mainly your quarterback, Ben Roethlisberger, who should be 39, I think, at some point in the season. And it just seems like while they have Dwayne Haskins, that could be a potential replacement for Roethlisberger when and if he decides to retire, you still have cap space problems. And this isn't a good thing for you if you're the Steelers. You generally know the TJ Watt's contract comes up at the end of the year. And it's not going to be an easy decision. You're going to have to decide, are you going to pay him or are you going to let him go? And more along the lines, he's going to earn maybe about $100 million contract with a lot of guaranteed money. It's really going to hinder, especially the fact that you have Juju Smith-Schuster, who's come back for the year because he didn't really get what he wanted out of free agency due to COVID. You're still going to have to make a decision on him. And is he going to want to stay if Roethlisberger leaves? Does he want to be a part of a rebuild? If there is a potential rebuild. And as good as the Steelers have been in drafts and really just finding talent, they're not much of a team that goes out and signs free agents. That's not who they are. They find other guys that fit in roles, and they just kind of go from there. And at some point, you kind of feel like it's going to run out. as good as the Steelers have been and as consistent as they've been, you just feel at some point it's going to stop. Eventually, the talent pool and the guys that are finding talent in that pool move on. And the Steelers have done as good as they can with the players that they've had and with the situations that they've had. But at the same time, Cleveland's not going anywhere right now. Baltimore's not going anywhere right now. Cincinnati's on the rise. And if they keep adding pieces, they'll be trending upwards possibly. Where does that leave Pittsburgh? You've got talent. Are you willing to pay for it and keep it there? And can you keep consistently bringing in talent? I just don't see it. At some point, eventually the wheel stops. And for Pittsburgh, it may be after this year. We'll see. And finally, the final team. And this was really a no-brainer. And it's really just the, oh, yeah, of course, kind of team. It's the Houston Texans. What can you say? I mean, we'll wait and see what happens with the Deshaun Watson situation. I can't really comment on it because there's just not a lot of full facts on it. But it's bad. Bad enough to the point where Houston had to go out and draft a quarterback. And they've signed quarterbacks. Their talent's basically gone. The guys that helped build the team the last few years ran it into the ground. Bad decisions were made that could possibly take years to siphon out and fix. This is not an easy fix. This might be probably the hardest job right now in the NFL. This team is just in so much disarray, and they have so little confidence, I'd say, at this point, that you just don't feel confident looking at this team on anybody at any matchup. If this team managed to win at least 2 games, I'd be shocked. That's how bad they look. And even with Mark Ingram there, I don't think they're going to keep him. He's not going to want to stay there. Who wants to stay on a team that's not going anywhere? Mark Ingram is in his prime. He wants to play somewhere where he can compete. It's not going to be Houston. All right, guys, we're going to take a quick 30-second break. And to end the show, we'll discuss the fall of Madden. It's declining. Is it falling for good? We'll be back in 30. This is The Power. I'm your host, Michael Bishop. The Power Hour is live and on the air. Streaming to you on YouTube and Facebook. Welcome back. It's been a great show, guys. I've really enjoyed myself. I hope you've enjoyed yourself too tonight. And to end our final segment tonight, I wanted to talk about the decline of Madden. And this is really a touchy one for me. Because I'm sure we've all grown up playing Madden at some point in our life. And we knew it was always a big deal when the game came out. It generally was like an unofficial holiday when Madden got to the point of where it was at its peak. People would basically count down to when the game was released. There was always a new feature. There was always the player ratings. There was always the soundtrack list. It was always exciting. It was basically like you're waiting for just a national holiday. It was almost at this point, it felt just as big as the Super Bowl. People generally got that excited. I remember the first copy of Madden I had. I remember I was a young teenager, and the first copy that I got was on a PlayStation, and it was Madden 2000. And I had so much fun playing it. And it was the simplest things, too. It was the fact that you just felt good that you could take your team and you could just beat up on everybody. And you had just cheat codes that you could put in. You had ones that could make your players giant. You could add ones that could make the football fumble every time you ran the ball. You had teams that you could load, like all industrial men, or you had ones that were like literally cowboys. And I'm pretty sure you had ones that were like Santa Clauses or something. I can't recall. If anybody knows this, please confirm it. But I'm just going off the top of my head. But that's what was fun about it. For me, it was just, you could do anything with it, and it just felt genuine. That the game developers were really putting their heart and soul into it. That they wanted you to have fun. That they knew you were going to spend money on this, and they wanted you to enjoy it. And it seemed to keep doing that over the last few years. I remember when I got Madden 2005. That to me was the best Madden ever. And you can debate me on that, but that was the year of the hit stick. That was literally the year where you could take a linebacker or a cornerback and you could just knock the tar out of the ball carrier or the quarterback, and it was great. It was amazing. I'm sure for some of you, Madden 2004, when Mike Vick was on the cover, that was about the closest you were going to get to playing Bo Jackson mode on a video game. Mike Vick was pretty much unstoppable in that game. You know, you could stop him, but he was almost unstoppable. And I remember Madden 2006, you had the QB vision. And like on different quarterbacks, you could like see how far they could see out on the field. Some could see smaller, some could see more. That's what made it interesting. That they were continuing to move the needle. They were continuing to find ways to make the game exciting. And lately, it just doesn't seem that way. Yes, there's a new console out. Yes, there are better graphics. They're beautiful. But it's the same game that's been on every other one. There lacks creativity. There lacks just that heart. EA Sports has basically just become what they didn't want to become. Just a machine rolling out games just to roll them out. And that's the sad part. Because you really feel like in those earlier years that there was heart and there was effort. And they genuinely cared about what they were doing. Madden himself was involved in the process. That's how good they wanted the games. They wanted people to remember these games. And even after the year, even the next year when it would come out, you'd be even more excited for what would come out. And that just hasn't been the case. It misses that heart. And while the new game is beautiful and stunning to look at, I want something new. Most gamers do. It gets tiring to just do the same thing over and over. The creativity is what counts. Creativity is what people crave. They want different. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, but sometimes there's always other ways to move forward. And I hope in the near future that they can kind of find their way again. And not just end up something that just is really just blah at this point. Because vision without heart isn't anything. It's just routine. Thank you for joining me on the Power Hour tonight. I know you could have been anywhere else and you chose to be here. And I'm very excited that we continue to keep doing this. Join me tomorrow at 7 p.m. We'll have another great show for you. I hope you all have a great night tonight and an even better tomorrow. So for Michael Bishop, this is the Power Hour. See you next time.